Let's do this. Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Today we're learning about the Shofar. We're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah because today's a big day. Today is the birthday of the world. Today is the 5,786th birthday of the entire world. Not man. Not man. Man is created in 6 days' time in Rosh Hashanah. So we're still young. But the world, not humanity, the world, heaven, I guess it's not even, everything except a man basically was created on the first day of creation, depending on how you interpret the commentary, 5,786 years ago. Are we live? Yes, we are. So it's interesting that Rosh Hashanah is observed on the 6th day of creation and not on the first day of creation, right? And what's the reason? Man. The reason is because the world without man is useless. That's what the reason is. And that's where the shofar fits in. The shofar, just like the act of biblical coronation of kings, happened when they would bring the king down to a certain spring and they would blow the shofar. It was amazing this week. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Ambassador of the United States, from the United States. Huckabee, what's his first name? Michael Huckabee. They met, they had a meeting, they had like a press conference at the City of David pilgrimage walk. Now, the pilgrimage walk is a walk of the pilgrims, the Jewish pilgrims that would rise to Jerusalem to make pilgrimage on Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos, and the 3 pilgrimage festivals. This dates back 2,800 years ago. And to have Secretary of State Marco Rubio stand up and say, listen, United States of America, we're just in our 250th year. But Israel is more than 10 times that age. Right? And here we are, we're arguing about Palestine, Palestine. Is it the land of the Jews? Are we occupying? We're not occupying. Right? Ridiculous conversation. You're rewriting history. It makes no sense. Right? What we're doing is that we are living in our own homeland, our promised land. It's the Holy Land. It's the land of Israel. How did I get onto that topic? I don't remember. So forgive me. I don't know why I got into the pilgrimage road, but I think I was saying something about the birthday of the world, shofar, and what we would do since the beginning of the temple times, 2,800 years ago, is that we would go up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage and we would blow the shofar. That's what we would do. We blow the shofar. Well, why would we blow the shofar? Oh, I remember now why I said it. Because they would anoint the kings at the springs, at the certain spring, which is where this meeting was, at the Shiloh spring in the City of David. So they would anoint the king over there, and then they would blow the shofar. The shofar was an act of coronation. That's what it is. It's an act of coronation. And in much the same way, we coronate God as king of the universe on Rosh Hashanah. That's what happens. It says when God created the world had no purpose until Adam showed up on the 6th day. And what did he say? Bayom, let us bow and prostrate ourselves before Hashem our God. When Adam said those words, now suddenly the world had purpose. Think about it this way. It's no big deal for God Almighty to be the master of his minions. Minions have I don't exactly know the definition of a minion, but I'm contrasting a minion to a thinking human being.
Follower.
Right. So like a factory-made follower, right? It's not a big deal for God to be master of factory-made followers, brainwashed, whatever, pre-programmed followers. But God needed to create AI. AI is you and me. He needed to create self-thinkers. And that these self-thinkers, Adam and Eve and humanity, should be able to come on their own to a recognition of God Almighty, and that is the purpose of it all. So this is where the shofar fits in, where we're recognizing how we blow the shofar in Rosh Hashanah as an act of coronation, an act of subservience, of submission, of acceptance, of coronation, where we're allowing God to be recognized as king. It's not a big deal to be a king over earthworms. It's not a big deal to be king over amoeba, but to be king over AI. Of artificial intelligence. That's what we are, independent intelligence. And for us to say, yes, I actually believe in God. Now that's a big deal. That's an act of Rosh Hashanah. That is what the shofar is about. What we're going to learn about today, as we progress inch our way through this Maamar, is we're going to learn about the different levels of shofar, recognizing that the shofar has multiple layers of depth. Just like in your relationships with the people that you love. Sometimes you talk to your child, and it's a superficial connection. Like, yeah, whatever. Maybe they're annoying you. Maybe you're in the middle of something. And your child calls you for the 17th time asking for the password. And you're like, okay, you give it to them, but you're like a little annoyed, right? That's a very shallow level of connection. But then you have, let's say, when your child is giving you tremendous nachas and you're very proud of your child. Right? That's a far deeper connection. Maybe there's a time when your child is safe from an accident or safe from some illness or something. And you're feeling deep, profound gratitude. Maybe then there's the connection you have with your child at her wedding. Right? You see, there's multiple layers of depth. In the same way, we have multiple layers of depth in our relationship with God. You see, remember, God and us are actually in a relationship. Right? It's got to be personal. If you don't have a personal relationship with God, you're not doing it right, folks. You're not doing it right. Right? If you don't know how to talk to God one-on-one, you're missing out. Imagine a relationship with your wife where you said, we get along great. The only thing we don't know how to do with each other is talk. We just don't know how to communicate to each other. With everything else, we're good. That'd be mighty weird, right? In the same way, our relationship with God has got to be personal. You've got to be able to talk to God. And sometimes I ask people, every time I lead tefillin with people, I say to them, okay, now we finished the tefillin, the formality part. Now I want you to make a personal prayer to God. And I give them coaching. I say, listen, close your eyes. Make a silent prayer. Talk to God like you talk to me. In your own language, in your own words. Whisper it silently, I don't want to hear, and go for it. And it's amazing to see how people react. They're like, really? I can do that? Normally they want to confront God like some mighty king, your master of the universe, great and awesome being. I mean, I guess that's one way to do it. But how about you call God Dad? Think about that. Call him Dad, Abba. Right? Suddenly it starts getting a little more personal, a little more perspective. Listen, Dad, I need something. It's very important. I know I haven't been perfect. I know I'm far from perfect. But I'm trying. I need this and I need that. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you that. Right? So you're developing some sort of a personal relationship. What?
But our communication and relationship with God is not just about what we need.
Correct. It's not just about asking for things. Prayer is not an ask-a-thon.
Isn't that greed when our relationship is based upon?
I don't know if it's greed or self-centeredness. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's why it's so important to understand that when you're in prayer, like in Shul, if you're in Shul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, if you're in prayer, you're not going through an impersonal recital. You're involved in a deeply personal conversation, right? And imagine you're talking to your spouse, right? And somebody comes over and says, hey, who do you think killed Charlie Kirk? What would you say? Would you be like, oh, that's an interesting question? It'd be insulting to your wife to just sort of turn around, right? You'd say, listen, can you see I'm talking to somebody? Like I'm in the middle of a conversation right now, right? In the same way, when you're in shul, you're in an intimate conversation. And when you talk to your spouse, it's not about getting stuff. You're not figuring out what your spouse can do for you. I mean, that's a very, very shallow, selfish way to relate to marriage. There's something called emotional intimacy. We're just together and we're just enjoying each other's company. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. We're taking a walk. We're talking about the weather. We're talking about nothing. We're talking about something deep. It doesn't matter. We're having a conversation. That also involves, there is certain things that I need from you. Fine. Okay. And maybe things that I want to give you. But that's the transactional part, very shallow, superficial part. The essence of the conversation is an emotional intimacy conversation, which is why it's such a grave insult to God when you talk during prayer. If you're in the middle of prayer, right? You're in the middle of the Kaddish. Kaddish is the holiest moment of the prayer. And you're yapping away about, I don't know, the broken pipe somewhere. I don't know, like some plumbing update. It's deeply insulting to God Almighty. Think about if you're standing in the Oval Office and you're speaking to the President of the United States and you get a text message about, I don't know, somebody calls you and wants to know if you want to pressure clean your driveway because they're in the neighborhood. I mean, would you take the call? Like, seriously, why would you do that? Why would you do that? You're speaking to God Almighty. And this is the depth of the authenticity of the relationship, which we have to develop. And I want to encourage you guys to let us raise the bar on prayer this year. Prayer is about emotional intimacy with God. It's not just about asking for stuff, which can get really annoying because I'm still waiting for what I asked for yesterday or last Yom Kippur. So hey, how many times did I ask him? It's not about asking. It's about Ask not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you. Ask not what America can do for you, but what you can do for America, right? Anyway, so where we're going with this is that we'll learn now that with the shofar, there's multiple layers of the shofar. Like in our relationship, we have multiple layers of depth with the spouse, with the child, even with an employer, with your colleagues. You have multiple layers of depth. I look at you like a friend. I can look at you like a Jew. I can look at you like a Democrat. I can look at you like a piece of my soul. There's different ways I could relate to you, right? And that's represented by the various depths of the various shofars. We're going to talk about 4 shofars right now. We're going to talk about the shofar that we blow in Rosh Hashanah. We're going to talk about the shofar that we blow inside the Holy Temple, the second temple. We're going to talk about the shofar we blow in the first temple. And then we're going to talk about the shofar that is blown in the first temple in the Jubilee year. Okay? Later on, we'll talk about 2 other great shofars, the shofar of Mount Sinai and then the shofar of Mashiach. All of this is leading towards something we've been talking about, which is how the great shofar is the shofar that will be blown by Mashiach. Keith, were you going to say something? I've answered. Good. I just want to welcome to our worldwide round table here one of our listeners from Boca. Great to have you with us around the table. Showed up from the virtual to physical. That's awesome. Love it. That's amazing. A global mindset. This is awesome. Okay, so let's take a look, guys. Now we discussed this. Let's take a look on page 6. We'll see it in the text over here. Page 6. We're in this book, for those looking online, a Sefer Maamarim from Kahut Publications. We've studied this book before. Okay, the Rebbe continues to explain the great shofar based on the commentary of Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the third Rebbe known as the Tzemach Tzedek, his commentary on the Alter Rebbe's discourse. In order to further explain how high the revelation of the great shofar is, the shofar of Mashiach, the great shofar, the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, quotes the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, from another discourse. There, the Alter Rebbe explains the statement of the Mishnah that when Rosh Hashanah occurs in Shabbat, they would sound the shofar in the Holy Temple, but not in the rest of the country, outside the Holy Temple. So in Shabbos, we don't blow the shofar, right? Why don't we blow the shofar? What's the reason we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos? The reason is because the Shabbos affects the same result as the shofar does. And that's why it's not necessary to blow the shofar on Shabbos. Take a look. The prohibition against the sounding of the shofar on Shabbos anywhere other than the Holy Temple is a rabbinic enactment designed to prevent the accidental carrying of a shofar in the public domain on Shabbos. Now, there's a very literal reason why they banned the shofar on Shabbos, is because they were afraid you were going to carry it on Shabbos, right? You're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. You might forget the shofar at home. You might carry it on Shabbos, and it's a violation of Shabbos, so they don't want you to violate the Shabbos. But that sounds like a very shallow reason. I'm like, seriously. Here we are. We're coming to coronate the king, right? Coming to coronate the king. It's like the most important event of the whole year. And you're like, we're worried that some shmendrik is going to forget it at home, right? Some guy with ADHD, something, is going to forget it at home. So because of him, nobody's going to coronate the king. I mean, seriously, it sounds a little dramatic, of measure in order to circumvent one guy carrying on Shabbos. I mean, to not coronate the whole king. It's like, we're canceling the presidential, what's the day? January 20th. What do they do? The presidential inauguration. We canceled the inauguration because we're worried. I mean, that some guy would have left his car keys at home. I'm like, seriously? So what's the reason? How can the sages take away this fundamental mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah simply to avoid a potential mistake? Like, there's got to be more depth to this. The Alter Rebbe explains that the purpose of the mitzvah of the sounding of the shofar is to reawaken God's desire to create the world by reminding him of the pleasure that he receives when we connect with him, represented by the sounding of the shofar. So the sounding of the shofar reminds God of our commitment to him, and therefore it arouses in God a desire to connect with us. And that way, when God's desire to connect with us is aroused through the shofar, then God wants to create the world for another year. Remember, we spoke about this. The lease is extended for another year. Now, that's the purpose of the shofar. Since Shabbos is a time when God's pleasure in creation is already revealed. That's what Shabbos is. The same thing as shofar. Sounding the shofar becomes less important and can never be pushed off, due to the concern that someone could come to transgress the prohibition against carrying on Shabbos. So it turns out that the purpose of Shabbos and the purpose of shofar is exactly the same thing. Shabbos is about allowing God to derive pleasure in this world. Shofar is about allowing God to derive pleasure in this world. That's the reason. It's not because we're worried about the guy leaving his car keys at home or for leaving the shofar at home. I mean, that's a shallow reason. But the deeper reason is because we don't need to blow the shofar in Shabbos, right? So it makes sense, right? But now the obvious question is, if now we understand why you're not supposed to blow the shofar in Shabbos because it's not necessary, then why was it that in the temple even on Shabbos, they did blow the shofar. Why do you think?
It's a Yom Kippur.
Nope, on Rosh Hashanah. Why was it that in the temple, even on Shabbos, they did blow the shofar? Why was that? Why would they do that? Ooh, Kevin from Singapore. Happy birthday, Kevin. What?
It added to the.
Oh, so Toby's right. Because the blowing of the shofar on Shabbos in the Holy Temple was a higher level. Like a deeper level of love that you feel to your child or to your spouse. The space of the Holy Temple was conducive to a deeper level of connection between God and the Jewish people. Just like at your daughter's chuppah, you're going to feel probably more connected to her than you would be when she calls you to tell you about how good your airbags work. You know, the wife, she calls up her husband. She says, I got good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? She says, I'd like to hear the good news. The good news is that the airbags in your brand new Lexus work very well. Right, good. Okay. So why is that? However, if God's pleasure in creation is already revealed on Shabbos, then why do we still sound the shofar in the Holy Temple when Rosh Hashanah occurs on Shabbos? Alter Rebbe explains that there are many levels to God's pleasure. We've spoken about this. We're just reading it inside the text, so we'll be able to meditate on it later, right? The Alter Rebbe explains that there are many levels to God's pleasure. And the level of pleasure that can be accessed by sounding the shofar in the Holy Temple is higher than the pleasure that is present on Shabbos. Therefore, sounding the shofar in the Holy Temple represents a significant additional benefit that outweighs the risk of the potential Shabbos violation. In terms of the Sefirot, this is going to get a little tiny bit Kabbalistic over here, so just put on your seatbelt for like 30 seconds. In terms of the Sefirot, the pleasure that is present on Shabbos comes from the external aspect of Keter, crown. Just flow with this, guys, which is the source of creation. The pleasure from the sounding of the shofar in the Holy Temple, however, comes not from the external aspect of Keter, crown, but from the internal aspect of Keter, crown, the lowest level of godliness that is beyond creation. So just whatever, just go with that for a second, okay? We're naming the levels, right? There's the crown, there's the lower level of the crown, the high level of the crown, the external, the internal, whatever. It doesn't really matter to us right now because for our purposes, we don't need to split a hair right now. For us, it's sufficient to say that there's different levels of love. There's different levels of connection. And if we're trying to make God desire this world and want to continue to create the world for another year, then we want to appeal to his love for us. So the regular shofar appeals to God's regular love to us, and the shofar in the Holy Temple on Shabbos appeals to God's deeper love. You go ahead.
Are they blowing by the Baikal on Shabbos?
No. You only do it in biblical times when there's a Beis Hamikdash and there's a Holy Temple. Yeah. The Tzemach Tzedek adds to this explanation of the Alter Rebbe. Now that was all the explanation of the Alter Rebbe. But the Tzemach Tzedek continues. He expands on it. By the way, this Tzemach Tzedek explanation is interesting. After the Alter Rebbe passed away, the Alter Rebbe raised his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Menachem Mendel. Why? There's a beautiful story just before Rosh Hashanah. The story goes that the Alter Rebbe, who was the founder of Chabad Hasidus, right? What he did was, it was a revolution in Jewish spirituality. He took Jewish mysticism and he made the executive decision to make it rational, to make it logical, to explain it in a way that we can actually understand. That's a big deal. Look at what we just read over here. Internal aspect of Keter, external aspect of Keter, that's Kabbalistic. What do I mean Kabbalistic? It's like something you're just going to accept. You can't understand it, at least not yet, right? So what the Alter Rebbe did was, in his Chabad movement, Chabad is not a denomination of Judaism, it's a movement. It's a movement, it's a philosophy, which is an approach, a mindset of understanding our faith. Now that's a paradox. Understanding our faith is a paradox. Faith is beyond reason. And if you can understand beyond reason, that's a paradox. So when Alter Rebbe did this, there was actually a heavenly accusation against him, and they wanted to take him from this world. He said to the Alter Rebbe got the memo from heaven that he was going to be taken from this world, God forbid, because humanity was not ready for this degree of revelation. The Alter Rebbe shared this with his daughter. Her name was Devorah Leah. When Devorah Leah heard this, she was a very, very smart daughter. What she did was, she walked in Erev Rosh Hashanah to the shul of the Alter Rebbe in Liadi. And there were 3 Hasidim there who were preparing for Rosh Hashanah. They were saying Tehillim. So what she did was, she goes over to the ark in front of the 3 people, opens the ark, and she said, I understand that there's a heavenly decree against my father. Rosh Hashanah is Day of Judgment, right? This is Erev Rosh Hashanah, minutes before Rosh Hashanah. She says, I understand that my father's life is in the balance because humanity is not worthy of him. I hereby am designating these 3 men over here as my court, as my Beis Din, to exchange me for him. let heaven take me and let him live, so that he can continue the tree which was planted by the Baal Shem Tov and his successor, the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, that the three of them together will be able to allow this tree to take root. Remember, like a tree needs 3 years before you're allowed to eat its fruit. She said the 3 generations need to take root before the tree of Chassidus can truly flourish. She did stipulate a condition that she's only doing this on condition that the Alter Rebbe will raise her son, the young Menachem Mendel, who wasn't 3 years old yet, as his own. And so it was. She sticks her head in the arch. She says the whole thing. Day after Rosh Hashanah, Tzom Gedalia, she passes away. She got sick like right away, and she dies on Tzom Gedalia the day after Rosh Hashanah. It's her yahrzeit. The Tzemach Tzedek was then raised by the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe lived. He lived. He was born in 1745. He passed away in 1812. So he lived a good 67 years, right? And he transformed Judaism. The Alter Rebbe was a new soul. It's very unusual to have a new soul in this world. We all are recycled souls, reincarnated. But the Alter Rebbe was a new soul. Everything about the Alter Rebbe was sensational. When you read his works, they're unbelievable. So Alter Rebbe raised this boy, the Tzemach Tzedek, as his own. He had a father, Shalom, but still, he was still raised like very, very close with the Alter Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek would go visit his mother's tomb, and he would sing a very beautiful beautiful nigun called the Nigun Shtachus. It's very meditative. It goes. I'll give you a little taste of it. Oh yadadam, oh yadadam, oh yadadam, oh yadadam. Very meditative. Oh yadadam, a little melancholy. Oh yadadam. She's a woman who gave her life in order that Chassidus could prosper. It's amazing. Anyways, why am I telling you this? Because when the Alter Rebbe passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek was extremely close to him. They had published already the Alter Rebbe's Maamarim, the discourses that we just read over here, this discourse. They published it. But in a dream, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe came to the Tzemach Tzedek in a dream, and he said to him, I want you to publish your commentary on my Maamarim, my discourses. The Tzemach Tzedek ignored it. He was like, I'm not doing that. It was only after 3 of his own children came to him and told him that they had the same dream, that the Alter Rebbe had come to them in the dream to tell their father to publish his commentaries on the Alter Rebbe's discourses, that he agreed to publish them, and that's what we were about to read right now. So I just want to give you the context of what we're reading. Okay, so here's the additions of the Tzemach Tzedek on the Alter Rebbe's teachings. Even in the internal level of Keter, God's pleasure can be subdivided into many levels, and not all levels that are beyond creation are considered equal. The pleasure that was caused by sounding the shofar in the first temple is higher than the pleasure that was caused by sounding the shofar in the second temple. What was the difference, by the way? The first temple had the Ark of the Covenant. The second temple did not have the Ark of the Covenant. It was a bare room. The second temple, the Holy of Holies, was empty because they had hidden it in the days, since the days of King Solomon. He had prepared a hiding place. And when the Babylonians came to conquer Jerusalem, the priests on protocol hid the Ark of the Covenant, and it's never been found since. So they didn't have it for the second temple. And even within the first temple, there's different levels, right? The sounding of the shofar on Yom Kippur, this is what you mentioned, Yom Kippur, during a year of Jubilee. What's the Jubilee? It's the 50th year. The 7th sabbatical, right? Which occurs every 50 years and was only observed during the time of the first temple, causes an even greater level of pleasure than sounding the shofar in Rosh Hashanah. In summary, we've mentioned the following levels of sounding the shofar, listed from lowest to highest. On Rosh Hashanah, outside of the temple, that's us. That's regular shofar blowing, right? Rosh Hashanah. 2 on Rosh Hashanah inside the second temple is the second level. 3rd level on Rosh Hashanah inside the first temple. And finally on Yom Kippur during the Yovel year and the Jubilee year in the first temple. Although they all reach extremely high levels, none of them can compare to the great shofar of Mashiach, described by the opening verse from Isaiah, right? And that's how we're going to end today. Even regarding the shofar sounded on Yom Kippur during the Jubilee year in the first temple, that's the 4th level. The verse still says, and you shall proclaim with shofar blasts, referring to the shofar as a regular shofar. It does not say a great shofar. It calls it a regular shofar, not a great shofar. Based on this, we see that the revelation of the great shofar in Isaiah's prophecy, which we mentioned at the beginning of this discourse, when Mashiach will come and will gather the exiles from Assyria and Egypt, is even higher than the revelation caused by the shofar sounded in Yom Kippur during the Yovel year. Next up, we'll talk about the significance of the shofar of Sinai, when the Torah was given, as well as the shofar of Mashiach, and we'll be able to appreciate, at least, I just want to conclude here by saying that at the very least, we're starting to be able to appreciate the awesome moment, which is the blowing of the shofar. The blowing of the shofar is not, some people, like, when I blow the shofar, they clap. It's not a musical performance. Seriously, if it is a musical performance, it's quite pathetic. I mean, let's be honest. This ain't no clarinet. It's not an electric guitar. There's better ways to make music than a shofar horn, right? You know what I mean? So it's not a musical performance. The shofar is a flow of divine love. It's a flow of spiritual energy. We're digging a hole to the core of our soul and we seeing what happens. Shofar is a time not to open your eyes, but to close your eyes. Shofar is a time not to close your heart, but to open your hearts, to let it flow, to connect with your core, to come back home. Yes, Keith.
No, you're right.
Keep that here.
Hearing that.
No.
You kind of want to share that joy in many ways, and I think that's why people clap or something, because they just
They feel that catharsis. Okay, fine, fair enough.
They feel like
Fair enough.
They've been awakened and all that.
No, because sometimes people say to me, Rabbi, that was such a good shofar blowing. And I'm like, what did you mean by that? Like what? Like, I'm not a musician, I can tell you that. The reason I'm not the cantor around here, right? Yeah, but I think that what we're trying to do now is we're raising the bar on our Rosh Hashanah experience. We're raising the bar. We're making Rosh Hashanah more meaningful. We're making it deeper, more authentic, where the shofar service becomes the pinnacle of the Rosh Hashanah experience. So we're starting to appreciate it as an act of coronation. We're starting to appreciate that our actions are vital to the entire Rosh Hashanah experience, to all of humanity. And I want to just remind you this interesting story. There was a huge debate during the Franco-Russian War. The Franco-Russian War, 1812, when Napoleon invaded Russia. And famous debate, the rabbis of Russia wanted Napoleon to win because he was promising religious freedoms. And the Alter Rebbe alone wanted the Tsar to win because he was promising religious persecution. How do you explain that? Why would the Alter Rebbe want to support the Tsar?
The Jews are like that, they stick together.
Because the Alter Rebbe explained that religious freedoms will lead to freedom of the body and death of the soul. Religious persecution will lead to restriction of the body and the flourishing of the soul. So what happened was that year, 1812, Rosh Hashanah, it was known that the Alter Rebbe understood that whoever blows shofar first, whichever camp blows shofar first, will dictate the outcome of the war. So the other guy, I forget what his name was, the Rabbi Aaron Karlin, I think it was. I don't remember which other fellow was. One of the colleagues of Alter Rebbe who sharply disagreed with his view, and he wanted to support Napoleon. He woke up very early on Rosh Hashanah morning. Normally Rosh Hashanah, you wake up and you take your time, you meditate. He woke up straight. He went straight into davening. The morning service takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get until shofar service, and he blew the shofar because he wanted to coronate Napoleon. As he reached the shofar blast, he sensed, being keenly spiritually sensitized, as he held the shofar, he said, he sensed the energy. Der Litvak hat schon reingehabt. The Lithuanian, referencing the Alter Rebbe, has already took advantage. What happened was, the Alter Rebbe, he woke up in the morning also early, but instead of going through the service and blowing the shofar at the time after Torah reading, in the regular sequence of the service, he woke up, he said morning blessings, and he said it straight, and he blew the shofar straight up, because he needed to preempt. And that's the reason Hasidim understand why the Tsar beat Napoleon. Yeah.
If I told you that when I'm in my home in Chicago, I love my wife. But when I'm in my home in Palm Beach Gardens, I love my wife more. And if we're on an island in the Caribbean, I love her even more. And if we're on a cruise in the Mediterranean, my love for her is even higher. You would say to me, your love for your wife is based on real estate, on location.
Yeah.
You got a problem.
I wouldn't say that.
I don't get this.
I wouldn't say that. Let me ask you about this real estate.
What difference does it make where you
Let me ask you a
are,
question. Did you love your daughter differently at her chuppah than you did at her?
I love my daughter like I love my wife. From the moment my daughter was born till this day.
Okay, so you're
my love for
consistent.
her is-
You're consistent.
I am
Your
consistent.
wife agrees with me, though.
I don't base love.
You know that your
on-
wife agrees with me.
I don't base love on an event or real estate or location.
Rabbi, I don't think it's that you love more, but maybe it's more emotional when
That's exactly the same thing.
When your daughter's
More emotional means more love.
mitzvah or graduating, it's more emotional. I don't think it's.
I wanna tell- I do not love-
We're talking
I would
about
argue
the
it's
higher-
different,
The higher levels
not
of
greater,
shofar
not
blowing.
lower, just different.
So a higher level of shofar blowing based upon whether it's you're here or you're there. Or
Yes,
that
exactly.
would be the same
Higher
for-
levels of emotion.
I don't know.
Let me ask you a question. Let's move from real estate
Yeah.
to experience. 1 second, okay? Would you, are you more present when you're in court vis-a-vis when you are on vacation? Are you more emotionally present, more distracted, more anxious?
It's
No?
not a good analogy.
Why not?
If you say to me, am I present, or am I more present when I'm in court, or am I more present when I'm on vacation, but a client called me about court?
Why would you take a call on vacation? Why would you do that?
Yeah, but when you're in the first couple,
I want to tell you, when I'm a
vacation,
Shabbos dinner,
that's not vacation.
tomorrow night is Friday night dinner. God willing, I'm going to be with my family, and my presence is going to be completely different than it is on Thursday night. Because on Thursday night, I'm just not that focused. I'm frazzled because it's Thursday night and it's almost Shabbos and there's things to do and places to go and people to see and I'm distracted. It is too bad for my kids, but thank God for Shabbos. TGIS, and I wish I could reach that status, but I'm not there. I'm not there, And there's a custom in Sweden. It's called fika, F-I-K-A. Anybody heard of this? Fika. Fika is a 15-minute break that couples will take from work. They'll go to like a Starbucks kind of situation. And there's actually, they don't sleep, they're not sleeping, they're talking. They go to a cafe. And there's even fika foods that Sweden offers, like certain kind of pastries, I think. And what they do is they talk about anything except for work and maybe something else. So they just are forced to connect for a few minutes in a crazy day just on something which has nothing to do with work, right? And it's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful custom that they have in this culture of fika, right? Where they're connecting, they're rising above the chaos, because I think we are the most distracted generation in history. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine what kind of therapy our kids are going to be in. The kids who grew up without even knowing a world without Pharaoh. Yeah. Our kids, again, they wouldn't even know what freedom felt like. This obsessive checking of our phones, this obsessive dopamine rush, this addiction to shares and likes and views and subscriptions and all that crazy stuff. They never knew a world without that. And their parents also are just as distracted. I wonder how many kids are going to sit on the therapist couch saying, I never saw my mother's eyeballs. Because she was always distracted, right? I think you're good for an ideological world, but I don't think it's realistic, not at least. Don't know. No, sorry. Anyway, so one last thing I want to say is, somebody said something. I forget it. Regards to Portugal, guys, I'm going to end it over here. It's running late, but lots of love, and I want to encourage you to evolve the love. The relationship with God is always got to get deeper. I think that your relationship with your spouse, with your kids, has always got to grow. It's got to grow, because if it's not growing, it's static, it's dying. That's the way I look at it. My son has never been online. I wouldn't let him. Now he's delighted. He doesn't go online. I said to my daughter the other day that one day you're going to thank me for not allowing you to have a smartphone until a certain age. So hopefully she will. All right, guys, have a great day. Thank you so much. So we instituted